You did not find your way to this moment by chance. As the noise of the world grows louder and the new year looms like another blank page waiting to be filled, something deeper inside you has begun to stir. It's not urgency, it's not panic, it's a quiet realization, a feeling that this time something must truly change, not the surface, not the habits, but the foundation. You're not just tired of being distracted or overwhelmed. You're tired of being at war with yourself. And that's where this moment meets you, not as a motivational high, but as a return. A return to the part of you that wants stillness, that craves clarity, that remembers what it means to feel whole. The Stoics believed that the answers we seek aren't out there, not in status, not in chaos, not in someone else's approval, but in how we choose to respond to life itself. They didn't chase freedom, they practiced it, one breath at a time. And if that resonates, if you're ready to walk a path of strength, reason, and quiet power, please subscribe. For you, let this be your first act of commitment to a life lived deliberately, one step closer to becoming the person you were meant to be. Most people wait for the collapse before they listen. They wait until the walls of their life begin to shake, until the job falls apart, the relationship disintegrates, the motivation disappears. Then they scramble for answers. But the signs were always there, quiet, subtle, ignored. That restlessness you feel when you're doing everything right but still feel wrong inside. That's the first tremor. That constant loop of anxious thoughts, even when nothing's technically going wrong. That's the second. These are not random discomforts. They are warnings from the soul, signals that you've been living outwardly successful, but inwardly disconnected. The real earthquake never starts in your schedule. It starts in your perception. You've been so busy reacting that you forgot what it means to respond with intention. Each day you move through without reflection, each emotion you obey without understanding, each decision made out of pressure instead of principle. These are the silent fractures, and eventually they split everything wide open. It's easy to blame the world for the chaos, the deadlines, the noise, the expectations. But look closely. It's not the world that spins you into distress. It's your unawareness of your own mind. You've given up authorship and settled for reaction. Epictetus once said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." Yet most people never question their reaction at all. They feel anger and speak without pause. They feel afraid and run. They feel tired and quit. No pause, no filter, no thought, just instinct. But you're not an animal. You're not a machine. You're a thinking being, a soul with depth, and depth requires reflection. Every transformation begins at the same moment, the moment you stop saying, "I don't know why I do this," and start asking, "What am I choosing to ignore?" That's where awareness lives. It doesn't arrive with a bang. It's quiet. It's the moment you look at a routine and realize it's just repetition, not purpose. It's when you feel anxiety, not as a punishment, but as a message. Your mind trying to wake you up. You don't need to burn your life down to change it. You need to stop sleepwalking through it. When you live in reaction, every minor disruption becomes a crisis. One email ruins your mood. One glance makes you question your worth. One mistake makes you spiral. It's not because life is cruel. It's because you haven't learned to return to yourself. That's the thing Stoicism teaches better than anything else. Your mind is your home, and when you don't clean it, anything from outside can take over. You cannot control the winds of the world, but you can build walls around your inner fortress. The earthquake isn't trying to destroy you. It's trying to expose what you've built on unstable ground, and what collapses under pressure was never strong enough to hold you in the first place. Carl Jung once wrote, Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. That's the truth most people avoid. They don't want to admit that their suffering is often rooted in their own blindness, because that would mean they're not victims. It would mean they're responsible. But responsibility is not blame, it's freedom. When you realize that you've been living in patterns you never questioned, you stop chasing new outcomes with old behavior. You pause, you reflect, and slowly you shift. Awareness is the birthplace of all change, but it's also uncomfortable. It forces you to stop pretending. You'll see how much of your day is driven by fear, fear of missing out, fear of falling behind, fear of not being enough. You'll see how much you've confused busyness with purpose, how many things you do, not because they matter, but because they distract you from what does. That confrontation can feel like a breakdown, but it's not. It's a breakthrough, because only when the false self begins to unravel can the real self step forward. This is why 2026 has to be different, not louder, not faster, not more goals and resolutions layered on top of a cracked foundation, but deeper, more honest, rooted. You are not here to perform a new version of the same identity. You are here to return to the truth beneath the noise. The inner earthquake doesn't come to destroy your life. It comes to show you where you've been living without presence, where you've made comfort more important than growth, where you've allowed the loudness of the world to drown out the wisdom of your own soul. And when you choose to meet that disruption with awareness instead of panic, with reason instead of reaction, everything changes. Not because the world gets easier, but because you get clearer, stronger, quieter inside. And from that quiet, you don't just survive life, you begin to shape it. So the question is no longer, how do I stop the earthquake? The question is, what have I been building on unstable ground? Because once you see it, you can rebuild. Once you feel it, you can listen. And once you decide to wake up, you'll never go back to sleep. Not because it's easy, but because the alternative, the numb repetition of unconscious existence, is no longer bearable. Growth begins the moment you stop running from your own tremors and start walking directly into their source. It begins now. There's a place inside you that doesn't move when the world does. It doesn't tremble when someone criticizes you. It doesn't collapse when plans fall apart, and it doesn't beg for approval to feel whole. The Stoics called it the inner citadel, not because it was a fantasy or an idea, but because it was real, alive, and always present. Somewhere along the way, you stopped visiting it. Life pulled you outside of yourself. It wrapped you in conversations, obligations, identities. You started to believe that your peace was something you had to earn, fight for, or be granted by the people around you. But the truth is, peace was never out there to begin with. It's been locked away, not because it was stolen, but because you stopped remembering where the door was. Every moment of panic you felt, the shallow breathing, the racing thoughts, the way your body tightens before your mind even knows why, it all stems from the same belief that the world can reach into your chest and control what lives there, that someone's words, someone's silence, someone's rejection can break the foundation of who you are. But it can't. It only feels that way when you're disconnected from your own center, when your self-worth has drifted so far into the hands of others that you forget who truly holds the keys. The fortress isn't built of stone. It's built of stillness. It's not defended by walls, but by awareness. The more you remember that, the less you'll flinch every time life pushes back. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." And that's the trap most fall into. You don't need chaos to feel overwhelmed. You only need to think in chaos. You don't need real threats to feel fear. You only need to believe the voice in your head when it tells you that you're not safe, not enough, not in control. That voice doesn't come from your citadel. It comes from everything you've absorbed from the outside. The world taught you to compare, to rush, to win approval, to prove your worth. But your inner fortress never asked you to perform. It only asks you to return. There's a strange kind of suffering that happens when you try to fix what isn't broken. You search for validation, try to be more productive, push yourself to be better, thinking peace will follow. But peace isn't the reward for self-criticism. It's the byproduct of self-trust. You don't gain strength by adding more. You gain it by stripping away everything that never belonged to you in the first place. That's what the fortress offers, a space untouched by the outside world. No matter how loud life gets, it can't reach what's rooted in stillness. Most people believe they'll finally be at peace when the noise stops, when the world softens, when people treat them better, when things go their way. But that's a fragile peace. It lasts only as long as your conditions are met. And when they're not, when someone misunderstands you, when the future changes suddenly, when you're left standing in the wreckage of what you thought was certain, what then? The fortress is not about escaping life. It's about being unshaken by it. Because once you remember how to sit inside your own presence, nothing outside of you can control what happens next. You don't rebuild this fortress by force. You return to it in silence, in honesty, in moments when you tell yourself the truth, even when it hurts. You remember that you are not what others see in you. You are not your status, not your income, not your mistakes. You are not even the thoughts you've grown used to believing. You are the awareness behind them, the observer who gets to choose what stays and what goes. Seneca once said, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself." And maybe that's what this moment is for. Not to avoid discomfort, but to remember that it cannot break you, not unless you forget who you are. Every emotion that disturbs you is asking the same question. Have you left the fortress? When you feel anxious, you've begun measuring yourself against something outside of your control. When you feel angry, you've placed your calm in someone else's hands. When you feel desperate, you've tied your peace to an outcome. That's not weakness, that's forgetting, and the antidote isn't to win more, it's to come back to yourself, to realize that the door to your calm has always been open, but you've been knocking on everyone else's. There is no amount of success, attention, or certainty that can replace the power of being centered. And when you return to that inner citadel, you don't become cold, you become clear. You don't reject the world. You walk through it differently. You speak with less urgency. You respond instead of reacting. You protect your time, your focus, your values. Not with aggression, but with quiet strength. Because now you remember what belongs to you and what never did. Aristotle said, "Knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom." But it's not just knowing your name, your job, or your history. It's knowing the part of you that cannot be touched by loss. The part that doesn't rise and fall with the applause. The part that remains when everything else changes. That's the version of you the fortress holds. And the more you meet that version, the less dependent you become on circumstances lining up perfectly. Carl Jung described the self as a circle whose center is everywhere and whose circumference is nowhere. The fortress in this way is not a place to hide. It's a way to live. To move through the world while still being rooted in something deeper. To hold joy without clinging. To feel sorrow without crumbling. To be praised without pride. To be rejected without shame. It is not indifference. It is internal order. And that is rare. That is powerful. You won't be reminded often to go there. The world will pull at you endlessly, seduce you into reactivity, distract you with performance. That's why you must remind yourself, when you wake up, when you lose focus, When someone's words start echoing too loudly, pause. Ask yourself, have I left the fortress? And then choose to return, not through escape, but through presence, through breath, through letting go of what is not yours to carry. The fortress is not a fantasy, it is your birthright, but it must be remembered, maintained, and walked into daily. The storm can rage, the winds can scream, but when your foundation is within, you are no longer pulled in every direction. You don't need everything to be calm. You just need to remember where calm truly lives. And it's here, always, waiting for you to come back. Most people spend their entire lives trying to fix what was never theirs to control. They rearrange their days around unpredictable outcomes, obsess over how they're perceived, and cling to the belief that peace will come when everything outside finally settles. But life doesn't work that way, and deep down, you already know it. You've felt it every time you tried to control someone's opinion and ended up exhausted. Every time you planned the perfect future and watched it collapse. Every time you gave your energy to things that never once asked for your permission. There's a quiet kind of suffering that grows from the illusion of control, because no matter how tightly you grip, the world still moves the way it wants to. But here's the truth that sets everything straight. Control is not a feeling, it's a choice. And it's not about the world, it's about you. You don't get to choose what happens. You don't get to guarantee outcomes or lock down the behavior of others. But you do get to choose how you respond. You get to decide what kind of person you'll be in the face of uncertainty. That choice might not feel as powerful as dominating your environment, but it's the only kind of power that can't be taken from you. That's what the Stoics called the dichotomy of control, the difference between what is yours and what is not. And once you learn to live by that line, everything becomes clearer. Think about how much energy you've poured into trying to control what's unchangeable. The missed calls, the silence, the job you didn't get, the person who didn't understand you. You analyze, you overthink, you brace for the worst, all to feel prepared. But worry is not preparation. It's just resistance dressed up as strategy. And it drains you. What if all that effort could be reclaimed and redirected toward what you actually can shape? Your thinking, your intentions, your character. Imagine the strength you'd build if you stopped trying to bend the world and instead learned to stand calmly within it. And they do pass. Every emotion, every high, every panic. It comes and goes. But your choices, those remain. How you carry yourself when someone disappoints you, how you speak when anger rises, how you move forward when plans fall through. These are your domain. They shape your life more than anything you can't control ever will. The Stoics never promised ease. They promised clarity, because with clarity, you stop wasting your strength on storms you were never meant to stop. Seneca reminded us that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. And if you look closely, most of your suffering hasn't come from events themselves, but from your resistance to them. You thought control meant changing the outcome, but real control is about changing the interpretation. The moment you stop needing everything to go your way is the moment you start to experience true peace. Not because life gets easier, but because your mind becomes steady. So many people confuse control with tension. They think being in control means being on edge, ready to correct, to fix, to anticipate. But that's not control. That's fear. And fear makes you reactive. It tricks you into believing that effort equals certainty. But the Stoic doesn't live for certainty. The Stoic lives for alignment, with reason, with virtue, with what can be known and chosen. When you align with what's in your power, you stop reacting to everything else. And you find a strange kind of calm that can't be touched by praise, by blame, or by chaos. There's a deep kind of relief that comes when you finally stop trying to manage the uncontrollable, when you stop checking your worth against someone else's behavior, when you stop trying to script conversations or chase outcomes, when you simply do your part, fully, honestly, with intention, and let go of the rest. That's not passive, that's mastery. It takes strength to focus only on your side of the equation. It takes clarity to let the world spin while you remain still. That stillness is not detachment, it's not indifference, it's wisdom. Epictetus said it plainly, freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control. That kind of freedom doesn't feel like force. It feels like breath, like room in your chest, like space in your mind. When you no longer carry the burden of outcomes, you begin to walk differently. You make decisions not out of desperation, but from clarity. You speak not to control how others hear you, but to reflect your own integrity. You give without strings. You let go without panic. You live without needing to grip everything so tightly. The world will keep moving. People will still misunderstand you. Things will break, shift, surprise you. That doesn't change. But what can change, what must change, is your relationship to all of it. You're not here to micromanage life. You're here to show up in your role, to do your part, to act with intention. Then release. Not because it doesn't matter, but because that's where your responsibility ends, and real power begins. Even Aristotle, long before modern psychology echoed the idea, emphasized the importance of voluntary action. He believed that virtue lies in choice, not in emotion, not in reaction, but in deliberate, intentional movement. So the question isn't, can I control this? It's, is this mine to control at all? And if it's not, then it's not yours to suffer over either. When you understand this, you start to protect your peace like you protect your time. You don't give it away to people's opinions. You don't offer it up to news cycles, to market swings, to someone else's emotional weather. You learn to say, this is not mine, and you leave it. That's not avoidance, that's clarity. And clarity builds peace, not the temporary kind, but the kind that lives under your skin, that holds you steady when everything else moves. In a world obsessed with outcomes, you'll look different, calmer, less reactive, harder to shake. People might even misunderstand your calm as not caring, but you'll know the truth. You're not detached, you're focused. You're not cold, you're clear. You've simply stopped giving away the most valuable thing you have, your response, to things that never deserved it. Control is not something you find, it's something you choose. And the more you practice choosing what's yours, the more powerful you become, not because you can manipulate the world, but because the world no longer manipulates you. That's the kind of strength no one sees coming, the kind that isn't loud, but changes everything, starting with you. You've probably felt it, like life is pressing back against every step you take. No matter how hard you plan, push, or prepare, something always veers off course. Delays, detours, disappointments. You brace yourself, you try harder, and still, nothing seems to bend the way you want it to. So you push again. You overthink, you control, and slowly, without realizing it, you become the one turning peace into a battlefield. But life is not something to overpower. It's not something to dominate into stillness. It's a river, and rivers don't yield to force. Most people aren't tired because they've been moving too fast. They're tired because they've been resisting everything that moves. They're exhausted not from effort, but from friction, from trying to rewrite what already is. You can feel it when you're in that state. Every little inconvenience feels like an insult. Every challenge becomes personal. But the truth is, life isn't attacking you, it's just flowing. And if you keep trying to stand still in the middle of that current, it's going to pull you under. Not because it's cruel, but because that's what rivers do when you try to control their direction. Letting go doesn't mean giving up. That's the misconception. People hear acceptance and think weakness, but acceptance is strategy. Letting go is not about sitting down and doing nothing. It's about choosing not to waste energy on what can't be changed. That's strength. That's clarity. That's where your real power starts to show, because when you stop trying to fight the current, you learn how to navigate it, how to use it, how to move with it instead of constantly against it. There's a certain grace in learning to pivot instead of push, in recognizing when it's not the plan that needs more effort, but the mindset that needs to shift. You don't always need a better method. Sometimes you just need to stop demanding that life match your expectations. The Stoics didn't believe in passivity. They believed in precision, in seeing what is, not what you hoped it would be. It's easy to get caught in the illusion that control equals safety. But if that were true, the most controlling people would be the most at peace, and we both know that's rarely the case. Control doesn't quiet the mind. It agitates it, because it places your peace in things that were never meant to be predictable. The market, the weather, someone else's behavior, a timeline that won't cooperate. And every time you demand that these things stay still for your comfort, you hand your well-being over to chaos. That's not strength, that's dependency. What you need isn't to stop the river, it's to understand its flow. Some days that means adjusting, other days it means pausing, and sometimes it means letting go of the very thing you thought you needed. That's not failure, that's movement, forward, adaptive, intelligent. Carl Jung once wrote, "What you resist not only persists, but will grow in size." That's the truth we all run from. The more you resist a situation, the more power it gains over you. But the moment you release the need to fight, the thing that felt so overwhelming suddenly shrinks. Not because it changed, but because your relationship to it did. You've probably seen it in your own life. The conversation you dreaded but finally had, and realized it wasn't as catastrophic as you feared. The job you lost that opened a door you never would have considered. The plan that failed but made space for something better. Those moments didn't come from force. They came from trust. Not blind trust in fate, but trust in your ability to respond to whatever comes. That's what navigating the river means. Not floating aimlessly, but guiding yourself with presence, not panic. You start to realize that every time life doesn't go your way, it's not necessarily going the wrong way. You just don't see the full picture yet. And that's okay. You're not supposed to. You're here to engage with what's in front of you, not to control what's ahead. That distinction changes everything. It lifts the weight you've been carrying. The need to predict, to force, to manipulate outcomes. It doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you care smarter. You move wiser. You adapt faster. Because your peace is no longer held hostage by the need for life to follow your script. Epictetus reminded us that events are neutral. What changes their impact is our judgment. So the flood isn't the enemy. The twist in the current isn't failure. It's just movement. And your strength lies in how you meet that movement. Will you tense up and sink? Or will you learn to float, to breathe, to adjust your course and keep going? Even Plato in his own way spoke of this adaptability. He believed that the soul becomes wise not through force, but through recognition of patterns, of truths, of alignment with what is. Wisdom is not rigidity, it's flexibility with purpose. And when you cultivate that kind of internal flexibility, nothing breaks you. You bend, you shift, you stay whole. So if you've been feeling worn down, tired from trying to hold everything together, it might not be because you're weak. It might be because you're still trying to stop a river with your bare hands. And maybe it's time to stop gripping and start gliding. Maybe it's time to let go, not in surrender, but in strategy. To move with the flow, not against it. because what you resist will wear you out. But what you engage with, what you learn to ride, to navigate, that's what turns you into someone unshakable. This year is not asking you to fight harder. It's asking you to move smarter, to stop demanding that everything bend to your will and start noticing how much easier life becomes when you work with its rhythms instead of against them. That's not giving up, that's growing up. It's trading control for clarity, panic for presence, resistance for direction. Let go. Not because you don't care, but because your energy is too valuable to waste on a fight that doesn't lead anywhere. Let go so you can finally move. Most people wait for perfect conditions to feel okay. They wait for the sun to come out, for the wind to settle, for life to hand them the ideal moment before they act, grow, or breathe again. But life doesn't work like that. The weather changes. Sometimes it rains when you need light. Sometimes the storm lingers far longer than you thought you could endure. But still, you're not powerless. Because your power was never in controlling the sky. It was in how you tended the ground beneath your feet. Think of your mind as soil. It holds the potential for everything. Growth, beauty, strength, but also decay. Neglect it, and it doesn't stay neutral. It grows whatever is planted, intentionally or not. That's where most people go wrong. They wait, they get distracted, and while they're looking up at the sky, wondering when life will be easier, the weeds start creeping in. Quietly, subtly. Thoughts of doubt, habits of avoidance, small fears that grow roots. And before long they wake up in a garden they don't recognize, a life that doesn't reflect who they truly are. But here's the truth. You don't need perfect weather to grow something beautiful. What you need is daily care. You need to notice what's growing and ask yourself if you put it there. You need to remove what doesn't belong, not with force or frustration, but with presence. The mind is not a battlefield, it's a garden, and even when it's been neglected, it will respond to care. That's the miracle of it. No matter how overgrown it gets, it can still be restored, if you start today. So ask yourself, what are you watering? What are you feeding daily? Every repeated thought is a seed. Every habit is water. Every ignored emotion is a root system forming quietly beneath the surface. And just because you can't see the damage immediately doesn't mean it isn't happening. Over time, neglected thoughts become patterns. Patterns become identity. And identity becomes fate. But fate isn't fixed. It's just a result of what you've cultivated, consciously or not. Seneca wrote, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, that is poor." In a world that keeps telling you to do more, chase more, control more, the real power lies in simplicity, in tending to your own space, in realizing that wealth isn't external, it's internal. It's a peaceful mind, a clear intention, a set of values that can't be shaken by temporary storms. The danger is when you start blaming the weather, when you forget that every gardener has to deal with wind, heat, and rain. The difference is how they prepare, how they adapt, how they show up each day anyway, regardless of the forecast. That's what Stoicism teaches, not indifference but discipline, not withdrawal but clarity. You don't wait for peace, you build it, one thought at a time, one routine, one morning you didn't skip, one truth you finally accepted. And what about the frost? The hard days that burn through your hope and leave you wondering if anything good can grow again. Those days are part of the process. They prune you, they test the roots. They teach you what can survive, what was shallow, and what must be replanted. You don't run from those seasons. You learn from them. You observe. You adjust. You let them refine your focus so that when the warmth returns, you know exactly what to grow next. Aristotle once reflected that we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. This isn't about grand gestures. It's about returning to the soil every day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard, to weed out what doesn't serve you, to nurture what does, to believe that even on the days when progress is invisible, your presence is making a difference, because it is. Every time you pause before reacting, you tend your soil. Every time you choose clarity over chaos, you reinforce your roots. Every time you resist the urge to compare yourself to someone else's harvest, you protect your peace. That's what a real gardener does. They don't envy another garden. They focus on their own. This is your space, your mind, your values. And yes, the storms will come. But storms pass. Weeds can be pulled. Soil can be renewed. What matters most is that you don't abandon it, that you don't hand your garden over to the world and ask it to take care of what only you can. Your inner world isn't the world's responsibility. It's yours. And the more you honor that, the more unshakable you become. Marcus Aurelius reminded us, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. That strength is not loud, it's not explosive, it's steady, quiet, rooted. It's the kind of strength that doesn't need to prove itself, because it's already done the work. It doesn't argue with the weather, it adapts, it keeps going, it grows, no matter what. So maybe this isn't the year to control everything. Maybe it's the year to care for what's already yours. Your thoughts, your space, your presence. Let the storms come. Let the winds rise. You have tools. You have discipline. You have choice. And most of all, you have the garden. Don't wait for peace to fall from the sky. Plant it, water it, protect it. It's already inside you, and it's been waiting for your return. Something happens. You're late. The meeting already started. A payment didn't come through. Someone said something that stung. In that instant, the event is real, but what you feel, that comes after. That comes from you. It comes from the story you attach to it, the meaning you assign without even realizing. Suddenly, being late means you're undisciplined. Losing money means you're doomed. An insult means you're not enough. But none of that is fact. It's judgment. And judgment, more than the event itself, is what actually breaks you. We often think pain comes from the outside, but it's not the world that cuts so deeply. It's the blade we turn inward, every time we believe a thought without testing it. This is the part most people miss. The mind doesn't just record reality, it interprets it, and interpretation is everything. That's why two people can experience the same situation and walk away with entirely different truths. One sees failure, the other sees feedback. One sees rejection, the other sees redirection. Same moment, different story. And that story determines everything that follows. This is where Stoicism becomes something far more human than people give it credit for. It's not about ignoring emotion. It's about understanding where that emotion is born. The majority of our pain doesn't come from the thing itself. It comes from the spiral that follows. The assumption, the internal blame, the mental forecasting of everything that will now go wrong. One simple moment snowballs into a catastrophe, but only because we gave it momentum. Carl Jung spoke often about the power of projections, the unconscious stories we place onto others, onto situations, onto ourselves. And until we see those projections clearly, we don't live in reality. We live in distortion. If someone criticizes you and your mind immediately whispers, "They must think I'm a joke," that judgment will shape not only how you feel, but how you act. You withdraw, you get defensive, you change who you are to avoid it happening again. All of that because of one silent interpretation that might not even be true. And what makes this especially dangerous is how fast it happens. a glance, a tone, a delay, and before you've even had a chance to pause, the judgment has already written a chapter in your head. That's why the Stoics practice something so radical for their time: emotional awareness without attachment. They trained themselves to pause before judgment, to ask, what am I telling myself right now? Is it helping me? Is it even true? Most people never ask that. They let the thought become the truth. But thought is not truth. It's a lens, and lenses can be cleaned. Aristotle noted, it is the mark of an educated mind to be able to entertain a thought without accepting it. In other words, you can notice an emotional reaction without letting it take over. You can observe a judgment rising and still choose to sit with it rather than submit to it. This is not suppression, it's sovereignty. Because when you blindly obey your judgments, you lose control of your experience. But when you slow down and investigate, you create space. And in that space you reclaim choice. This practice isn't glamorous. It won't impress a crowd, but it will save you from unnecessary suffering. It will keep you grounded when the world wants to pull you into drama, into fear, into the trap of overthinking. You don't need to become a monk. You don't need to silence every feeling. But you do need to get honest about the voice inside that labels everything before you even realize it. Let's be clear, there are real things worth grieving, worth fighting for, but clarity matters. If someone disrespects you, that's a problem. But assuming that means you're worthless, that's your judgment speaking, not truth. If you fall short of your own standard, learn from it. Don't bury yourself in shame. Shame is often just judgment turned inward, and it grows in silence, in the places you never challenge. The Stoics were not emotionless. They were disciplined. They understood that feelings are not enemies, but they are not rulers either. Feelings point towards something, but they don't always tell you what. That's your job, to ask, to listen, to sift through the noise until you reach something real. That's the work of a philosopher, not to deny the world, but to see it clearly, to remove the fog of assumptions, and to respond with intention. Judgments are sneaky. They wear the costume of truth, but they're often just defense mechanisms, stories created to protect you from uncertainty. If something bad happens and you immediately decide, I'm cursed, then you've wrapped the moment in meaning. But meaning is not fixed. You can rewrite it. You can replace panic with presence. You can turn insult into insight. But only if you slow down long enough to realize, this isn't the world attacking me. This is me interpreting a moment through a lens that may need to be cleaned. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment. That's not just a quote, it's a life-saving truth. Because the moment you stop giving your judgments authority, you get your life back. You see the insult, but don't internalize it. You feel the setback, but don't catastrophize it. You see a flaw in yourself, but don't turn it into a sentence. This is where true freedom begins, not in changing the world, but in changing how you perceive it. The world is chaotic, people are flawed, life is unpredictable, but none of that has to decide your internal state. You don't need perfect circumstances to feel peace. You just need better interpretations, and those are within your power, always. So when something happens this week, pause. Before you react, ask yourself, what am I telling myself about this? Is it fact, or is it fear dressed up as truth? That moment of reflection might not change the event, but it will change how you carry it, and how you carry it changes everything. Judgment is a lens. Clean it often, check it carefully, and never forget, you can always choose a clearer view. You walk into a room and immediately scan the faces. You're not looking for danger, you're searching for approval. A nod, a smile, a flicker of interest. And if you get it, your chest lifts. If you don't, even slightly, something inside you shrinks. You tell yourself it's just being human, just being social, but there's something deeper happening here, something most people never question. You've outsourced your worth to the reactions of people who don't even know your name, and it's draining you, quietly, relentlessly. At some point, we all did it. We learned to survive by fitting in, by pleasing, by reading the room and adjusting ourselves like a mirror, reflecting what others wanted to see. And maybe it worked. For a while. You avoided conflict. You got the pat on the back. But slowly, almost invisibly, something else happened. You forgot what it felt like to speak without waiting for a reaction. You forgot how to move without checking if you were being watched. You started living like someone on stage, always performing, always waiting for applause. And that's not living, that's self-abandonment. Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But becoming requires detachment, not coldness, not arrogance, just the calm strength of someone who no longer needs to be chosen to feel valuable." When you're ruled by opinions, you become a willing prisoner. The cage isn't locked. It's made of your own need to be liked. And the moment someone doesn't respond the way you hoped, that cage tightens. But the truth is, you're the one holding the key. You always have been. Seneca wrote, "He who seeks approval is dependent on others to live." And he didn't mean that connection is wrong. He meant dependency is. There's a line between valuing people and being owned by them, between empathy and erosion. And that line gets crossed every time you betray yourself just to keep someone comfortable. Every time you water yourself down, hold your tongue, or pretend to agree because silence feels safer than rejection. But peace doesn't come from being agreeable. It comes from being aligned with your values, with your voice, with your vision. There's a version of you that's waiting behind the curtain, not louder, not flashier, just more real. The one who speaks with clarity even when it shakes. The one who walks away when something feels off, even if it means standing alone. That version isn't interested in being admired, they're interested in being whole. And that shift, when you stop auditioning for roles that don't fit, is the beginning of true confidence. Not the kind that demands attention, the kind that doesn't need it. The world will always have something to say about your choices, your body, your work, your silence, your boldness. If you bend to every comment, you become a shapeshifter, not a person, and you will never feel grounded when your identity is built on sand. Approval is fickle. One day you're praised, the next you're questioned. You can't base your inner stability on something that changes with the wind. It's like trying to build a house during an earthquake. Nothing holds. Instead of asking, "Do they like me?" try asking, "Do I respect myself in this moment?" That question cuts deeper. It invites you to return to yourself, to your compass, because you can spend your life winning the crowd and still lose your soul. You can post, perform, please, and still lie awake at night wondering why it all feels hollow, because applause doesn't mean alignment, and being seen is not the same as being known. This is not a call to rebellion, it's a return to center. You're not here to impress, you're here to express, not to prove, but to embody. You don't need louder opinions, you need a quieter mind, one that doesn't flinch every time someone frowns, one that doesn't collapse when someone disagrees. That's the difference between seeking peace and being peace. One is outside in, the other is built from the inside out. You are not a product, you are not a brand, you are not a reflection of likes, shares, or nods of approval. You are a human being with depth, with contradictions, with a truth that can't always be simplified for others' comfort. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is not explain. Not convince, just stand there, quietly rooted in who you are, even if no one claps. Think about how much time you've spent adjusting for others. Now imagine what that energy could do if it came back home to you. Imagine creating because it lights you up, not because it gets clicks. Speaking because it's true, not because it's safe. Showing up without the mask, without the filters, without the need for reassurance. That kind of life is not loud, but it's free. And freedom doesn't ask for permission. The path away from this dependency is not about isolation. It's about discernment. Knowing when to listen and when to let go. Knowing the difference between feedback that helps you grow and noise that keeps you small. Not everyone's opinion is worth your peace. Not every reaction deserves your adjustment. Not every rejection is a reason to shrink. You don't have to be cold to be free. You just have to stop negotiating your worth in every room you enter. The most powerful people aren't the ones who talk the most. They're the ones who don't flinch when misunderstood. They don't need to be the center of attention. They don't need validation like oxygen. They move with quiet authority, built on years of choosing integrity over popularity. That's not arrogance. That's self-respect. You've spent enough time editing yourself to fit into spaces that weren't built for you. It's time to build something of your own. A mindset, a mission, a life that doesn't require applause to feel alive. That doesn't crumble when it's questioned. That doesn't shift with every new opinion. You are not here to be liked. You are here to become. Becoming is not always visible, not always applauded, but it is always worth it, because once you stop begging the world to see you, you finally see yourself. And in that moment, something shifts. The cage disappears. The need quiets. The peace returns. Not because the world changed, but because you stopped giving it the keys. The strongest person in the room is often the quietest, not because they have nothing to say, but because they've already said it to themselves, deeply, over and over, until it no longer needs to be broadcast. In a world addicted to noise, arguments, performances, declarations of dominance, there is a rare kind of power that doesn't ask for attention. It simply is. It walks in stillness, listens more than it speaks, and moves with the calm presence of someone who doesn't need to prove anything anymore. That's real strength, and it's the kind most people overlook because it's not dramatic or flashy, but it's the kind that lasts. We're raised to believe that power is loud, that it takes up space, that it announces itself. But if you look closely at the people who've mastered themselves, who walk through life with true inner control, you'll notice something different. They don't rush to correct others. They don't panic when misunderstood. They don't enter conflict to win. They enter when necessary, and even then they do it with restraint. That kind of self-possession isn't natural. It's built, slowly, in silence, in discipline, in private moments when no one's watching. Seneca once said, "The greatest blessings of mankind are within us and within our reach." That includes strength. Not the kind you're told to display, but the kind you earn by facing yourself, by outgrowing your reactions, by not needing to be louder just to feel seen. Because when you're grounded, your presence does the talking. And there's nothing more unnerving than someone who cannot be provoked. They don't flinch. They don't chase validation. And when you speak to them, it feels like speaking to the earth. Solid, unmovable, steady. Strength isn't about being emotionless. It's about being unmoved by what doesn't matter. It's not about suppressing your feelings. It's about mastering them, letting them rise, letting them pass, and still choosing your response with clarity. That's not weakness. That's control. And control doesn't shout. It observes. It waits. It acts only when the action matters. We've been conditioned to associate silence with passivity. But there's another kind of silence, the kind that holds weight, the kind that makes people lean in. In 2026, you don't need more noise. You need less internal chaos, less reacting, less explaining. You need to be so aligned with who you are that you no longer argue with people committed to misunderstanding you. You no longer feel the urge to win every conversation, to dominate every room, to prove you're right. That urge is what weakens you. What strengthens you is the stillness that follows after you've let that go. Carl Jung once observed that loneliness does not come from being alone, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important. And yet, those who walk the path of depth often realize they don't need to explain those things to everyone. They just need to live them. They embody what they value instead of preaching it. And in doing so, they communicate something more powerful than words ever could. Their life becomes the message. Their consistency becomes their signature. And their silence, unapologetic, peaceful, strong, becomes their presence. You don't need to be louder to be heard. You need to be clear within yourself, because clarity doesn't scream. It speaks once, and then it moves on. That's the art of strength. To state your boundary without begging for it to be respected, to walk away without threatening, to lead without needing applause. That kind of strength doesn't rise from pride. It rises from purpose, and it's always rooted in something deeper than ego. Think of a tree that stands through storms. It doesn't yell back at the wind. It doesn't argue with the rain. It just remains. That's you, when you stop flinching every time someone tries to challenge you, when you realize you don't owe a response to every provocation, when you start choosing your energy like it costs something, because it does. Every time you get pulled into unnecessary conflict, every time you waste time defending your character to someone who never respected it, you lose a piece of your strength. And in 2026, you reclaim it, not by fighting louder, but by standing firmer. People often think power is about being fearless, but real power is about being calm in fear. It's not about never doubting yourself. It's about not acting from that doubt. It's about holding space for uncertainty without letting it run your life. It's about realizing that the most intimidating thing you can do is to stay steady when everything around you shakes. That's not indifference. That's mastery. And mastery is always quiet. The most dangerous opponent isn't the loudest one. It's the one who can't be manipulated, the one who doesn't take the bait, the one who knows exactly who they are